Hey guys, Dozer here, bringing you a new video about Tales of Aria. This past week when we were getting all of the reveals for the new set, I was really busy prepping for the calling. If you're interested in seeing how I did, go feel free and check out this link here in the top right corner. Otherwise, I wanted to do a brief but thorough breakdown of all the cards in the new set, now that we've seen them all, and to give you my first impressions of what the new cards are as far as power level and usefulness before we can start going into the new decks. And we'll see, it'll be interesting to see, like, oh, how strong is this card now versus how strong it is later. Now I've gotten a good chance to look at all the cards, and so I think I can give a better idea than when we first had them all revealed. So I tried to wait off before making this video. So let's get started. So the first order of business is going to be to talk about the amulets. So the amulets are very interesting. One, they're items, so they're action cards, and they all have go again, which means you can play this on your turn and keep going, which is really important for characters like Briar. Briar is really happy to have the ability to play Amulet of Lightning and Earth, to be able to deal, well, not to be deal any more damage, but also to be able to trigger her lightning token. So if she plays two non-attack actions in a turn, she makes a lightning token, which enables her to get just that much more go again on a turn. And so she has some good setup power with this. Additionally, they all pitch blue, so they're all great for resource. They all help you fuse, and I think the amulets are going to be very good. I think the Earth Amulet is going to be a bit harder to use than other amulets, just because Earth Fusion seems to be the weakest at the moment, with also the smallest benefit. But I think having that extra +1 damage threat is going to be relevant over time, so definitely don't sleep on it. But I think Amulet of Lightning is definitely the most reliable right now. Lightning Fusion, giving anything go again, is going to be really, really strong. Even if you did something like you attack with a Lightning Fusion, like Entwine Lightning with go again, you can Entwine Lightning, revealing Amulet of Lightning. Then you can play Amulet of Lightning with go again, destroy it as an instant, and then flip over a non-attack action like a Tome of Fyendal, and then keep going. That's pretty strong. I feel like we need to be on the lookout for Amulet of Lightning. Amulet of Ice is also pretty solid, but Ice Fusion tends to only happen on your own turn, so it'll probably be one of those things where you play it early on, you set up, and then on a turn where you go for an Ice Fuse, before you have the card hit, your opponent might not full block, and then you can Amulet of Ice to make them choose whether or not they want to keep any cards in their hand or if they're going to have to discard stuff. So that'll be pretty relevant. So I think Amulet of Ice is probably the second best one, and then Amulet of Earth is probably the weakest one. This card here, Arcanic Shockwave, is a Runeblade elemental card that fuses lightning and deals an arcane if you fuse it. It seems to be good. Costs 0, attacks for 4 with an arcane. That's Searing Shot levels of damage. So, and it helps you turn on your Earth tokens as Briar. So I think Arcanic Shockwave is fine. I think the fact that it doesn't have natural go again is going to hold it back, because you're going to really be relying on hitting either the Amulet of Lightnings or Flash or just other cards that give it the go again. But it does cost 0, so it is going to be a decent choice all around. I think it'll be a solid card. If I had to give it a star rating or in the letter grade, I would say as letter grade I would give it I'd give it a B. It blocks 3, it's a class card. It doesn't fuse for anything, which is a problem, just for ratios, but I think it's a solid B card. You definitely can think of including it in a Briar deck. Autumn's Touch is an Earth card. Now, I think Autumn's Touch is actually probably one of the best Earth cards. If I had to give it a rating overall, I'd probably give it a B+. It's a Raging Onslaught, that's an Earth card. And off the bat, that means that we can use it to block 3, which is huge because very few elemental cards block for 3. And it also attacks for 7 as a red, or you can pitch it blue and block 3 as an Earth card. I'm of the opinion that elemental cards are going to be best used, or like the earth, fire, no, sorry, earth, lightning, ice, are all going to be best used as blue cards, just so that you can have them in your hand for the pitch and the block. I don't think you're really going to want to play earth cards, for instance. Like out of hand or anything. So I think Autumn's Touch is going to be one of the better ones to have, just because of the block and because of the pitch. So I would give it a solid B plus. Awakening. Awakening is a very interesting card. It's an Earth fusion that says uh, if you have less life than your opponent, you create seismic surges equal to the difference of HP. And if you fuse it, instead you create twice that many. So it costs 2 for that. It's an instant, so you can do it on either player's turn. And you can, as its effect, you can search your deck for a Guardian attack card with cost less than or equal to the number of seismic surges you control. So that's pretty interesting. Like if you are down 6 HP and you Earth Fuse this card, you get to search basically any card in your deck that's an attack. So that's kind of crazy. This card is definitely going to allow for a lot of comebacks, letting you play cards for free, and will definitely help you power through frostbites and things like that when you get these really high number of seismic surges. So I would say Awakening is probably an A tier card. I think that is definitely a very strong card that you can build around, and definitely helps making Earth fusions worth it. Although you don't even have to fuse to get the value, which is key. Ball Lightning, I think this card is an S tier card. The fact that it has natural go again, costs 0, and is a lightning card means that you can do a lot of really gross things with it, as far as how you do the combat chain, how you do fusions, and it adds on hit damage to all your lightning and elemental attacks. So you can really just amp up all of the on hit damage, especially if you get multiple of these going on the same turn, or you stack multiple on hit triggers. Ball Lightning is going to be really strong. I think Ball Lightning is S tier. I don't think I would run yellows in most cases. I would probably just run reds and blues, but it's definitely a strong card. Biting Gale is a defense reaction for Guardian. Ice Fusion, which makes them discard unless they pay 2. It's not the best card. I think it's a little overcosted, and you have to get the Ice Fuse for it to really be worth it. In draft, it's going to be okay, but I think in constructed, I'm looking at this as like a C tier card. I think if you really want defense reactions, there are better options. So I wouldn't be running this card personally. Blink. Now Blink is S tier. Blink is crazy. It's a 0 cost lightning that gives you an action point. So it's the perfect fuse target, because you can fuse with something, and then after the card resolves, you can blink to get your action point back and keep going, which is crazy. It's blue, so you can pitch it for stuff and save it for later, which is crazy. And it combos with other non-attack actions like Tome of Fyendal. So you can Tome of Fyendal, draw this card, and then play it. I mean, it's really crazy. Blizzard is equally crazy, by the way. These majestic elemental cards are kind of crazy. Blizzard makes a target attack action lose and cannot gain go again as an ice card unless they pay 2. So if your opponent only has 1 card in hand and is activating a bunch of go agains, or they're playing very low to the ground and trying to efficiently attack with all their stuff, Blizzard can just outright end their turn, which is insane. This card is absolutely gross. This is going to be like a mandatory 3 of in any ice deck, just as a sideboard card to stop, because it works on attacks, not just attack actions. So it stops Chain, it stops Katsu, it stops Prism, Lexi herself, it stops Briar. I mean, Blizzard's going to be guaranteed S tier card, if not S plus tier. Like, this card's insane. Going from there, Blizzard Bolt is a Ice Fusion arrow that lets you create a Frostbite token whenever an attack deals damage this turn. So you are going to want to give that go again with the Lightning Bow Voltaire to make it really worthwhile when you fuse it. But being able to attack and create a bunch of Frostbites with an efficient arrow is pretty good. I would say that's either I would say that's an A tier card. That's definitely something you would want to run in a Lexi deck, especially if you're focusing on the Ice Fusion archetype. If outside of the Ice Fusion archetype, I don't think you'd really want to run it. I think it's going to be true for every fusion card. You're never going to really want to run them unless you're planning on fusing them. So, Blossoming Spellblade. Earth and Lightning Fusion, which means you need to do both types. If it was fused, it gains whenever this deals damage to an opposing hero, you may banish a non-attack from your graveyard. If you do, you may play it this turn as though we're an instant, and then if you do this, you would banish it instead of putting it back in your graveyard. So this lets you recycle your cards, and when you attack with this, if it's fused, it deals 1 arcane. So right off the bat, you're coming at them with an arcane. If they can't stop the arcane, they get to they'll take the damage, and then you'll get to banish a non-attack, and then you'll get to play it as an instant that turn. It doesn't have go again naturally, but that's fine because you're getting all these instants, right? And so if you manage to stack other on-hit effects onto it, then you can have some pretty big turns where you can do like a lot of arcane with one of the Runeblade cards, or you could even do like other cards. Like you could play Tome of Findall from Graveyard, or Energy Potion, or a whole bunch of other things. Like it's very open-ended and very flexible. So I would say Blossoming Spellblade is definitely a build-around card. I think you can pull off some really crazy turns with this. And I would probably give it an A tier. I don't think it's S tier. I don't think it's auto-include by any means in Briar. Although it is strong, I think it'll probably be a bit trickier to use. So I would probably bump it down to A tier, but still good. Bolt and Shot is a arrow that has +1. If it has higher than its base attack, it gets go again and reload if it hits. It costs 0. It's an efficient card. I think it's good. I think the only reason you wouldn't run this in Lexi is that you're trying to really hit your fusion triggers. But the ability to reload is pretty strong by just Voltaire this into Arsenal, give it +1, attack for 5, go again naturally, and then if it hits reload. That's pretty strong, so I would definitely not sleep on this card. Bolt and Shot seems pretty good. Now Bramble Spark. Bolt and Shot, we'll say that's an A tier card. Bramble Spark is easily an S tier card for Briar. The fact that it's a +4 damage on your turn is really gross. It's really easy to fuse it because it costs 0. And with Briar, you can buff your non-attack actions defense with your Earth tokens, which this helps you make more of. So if you're trying to go for more of a defensive build, or a tempo snowbally build, Bramble Spark is going to be one of the best things you can do. Also, it synergizes very heavily with your other cards, and the only downside to it is that your cards that rely on doing arcane to get their bonus effects aren't going to be able to do that if you get stopped by Null Rune. So Null Rune's going to be really key to countering Briar. So I would say Bramble Spark's going to be S tier. It really helps combo with Stir the Wildwood, especially. So then we can get into Break Ground. This card, I don't really see this as being a good card. It's an Earth card that lets you attack with it and put a card from your arsenal and draw a card. But the thing is, it doesn't have go again. So if you can't give this go again as a 3 cost, so you can't even raise or reflex it or anything. You are effectively just swapping your arsenal with another arsenal card, because you're not gonna be able to play the other card that turn. So I would say Break Ground's at most a C tier card. You might want to use it for fusion, but at the same time, the Earth fusions aren't even that strong normally, so I would say that Break Ground is probably not something you want to run unless you're in draft or something. That's all you have access to. If you do run a color of it, I would say you'd probably just run the blue, just because you need the pitch. I feel like running the red and yellow is probably not wise. I would give Break Ground C tier. Briar, we can skip her. However, Briar is pretty interesting. Well, I guess we won't skip her. So Briar is really interesting. She can run Earth and Lightning cards in her deck, as well as Runeblade cards. And so her first effect is whenever an attack action you control deals damage to an opposing hero, you create an Embodiment of Earth token. Embodiment of Earth gives +1 defense to your non-attack action cards when you're blocking. So those are really strong when you stack them up. And every time you deal an instance of damage with the attack, it gives you a token. So if you deal Arcane with an attack and then some physical damage, that's 2 tokens for you. So you can easily get up to like 4 tokens on a turn if your opponent can't stop your arcane. Her second effect is whenever you play your second non-attack action on a turn, you create an embodiment of lightning token, which gives your next attack go again, your next attack action card. So it's kind of like a quicken token, but only for attack action cards, which is important because sometimes you're not going to want to consume it right away. So you'll attack with your weapon instead of the attack action, and because you're attacking with a weapon, you're not popping your tokens, so you're preserving your token for the next time you want to attack with an attack action card. So I think Briar's going to be pretty strong, if a little linear. So Burgeoning is it's a decent card. I mean, it's a 7 for 2. It's okay when you play it from Arsenal. As an Earth card, I think if I were running it, I'd probably just run the blue again, but I would probably put Burgeoning at like a C tier card as well, just because it doesn't really do anything special, and you know, there are other options. I would say Buzzbolt is probably the it's an interesting card for Lexi. It's a Lightning Fusion, and it has the ability to give everything an extra 1 damage on hit. So Buzzbolt plus Ball Lightning is going to be a pretty strong combo, but the problem is that Buzzbolt costs 1, it's Lightning Fusion, and yeah, it has like a decent stat line, but you have to hit with those. So while you can set up some pretty good things, Buzzbolt is probably going to be a combo card with the Ice Fusion, so you're probably going to run this in a hybrid list more than a pure Lightning list. I think there are better cards for Lightning that don't rely on hitting when you fuse. So I would say Buzzbolt is probably a B+ tier card, maybe A- depending on your build. However, Channel Lake Frigid, this is an S tier card. Channel Lake Frigid is an awesome card to jam your opponent's strategy, and it's really strong against go wide decks. So definitely a sideboard card, but a very powerful one at that. And you'd probably want to pivot to more of an ice build to run it, obviously, but even if you don't, even stopping them for 1 turn is pretty strong. So I'll put Channel Lake Frigid at S tier. Channel Mount Heroic, attack actions, you control it +3. You can keep it alive for a while. It's very hard to give go again to Earth cards. So unless you're running like a bunch of Lightning cards in Briar or something, which all have the go again, unless you're pitching your Earth cards, like I said, that are the blues, then you're not really going to be able to get a ton of value off of this card. But if you can get a couple triggers off it, it's really efficient. So I would say Channel Mount Heroic is probably an A tier card. It's just going to take some work to get some value out of it. Whereas Channel Thunderstep is probably a, honestly, it's an A- tier card, I would imagine. The fact you have to pay extra resource to get things go again means that you're really going to struggle to get value out of this in decks like Lexi, where you don't really need this card. You can't run it in Oldhim, so the only person left is Briar, and the problem with Briar is that she already has a lot of go again with Lightning cards. So unless you're running a heavy Earth focus with Channel Thunderstep as a way to make use of all your extra pitch and to attack a bunch of times with Earth cards, I can't see Channel Thunderstep being that great right now. It seems to be one of the weaker channels, so I'd put it below Mount Heroic, and I'd probably say Channel Thunderstep lands at A- tier on any sort of letter grading system. Chill to the Bone seems to be pretty good as an ice card. You probably want reds and blues in a deck if you have the ability to run them. I think the on-hit trigger is relevant because it doesn't give any attack buffs, so you really have to make sure you're getting good value out of, say, a weapon attack, like with Oldhim. But for Lexi, I don't think it's that strong. You really need your cards to be doing more than making 3 Frostbites. Although the red is 3 Frostbites is a ton, so the red is probably worth running and playing, and the blue is potentially worth it for the pitch and the fuse, but I would say it's probably a low A tier, high B tier card. Seems to be pretty strong from the testing I've done so far. Now, Chilling Icebane is a S tier card for Lexi. This card's awesome. You really have to choose whether or not you're going to run this based on what fusion you're going to focus on. If you're going for Ice Fusion, you definitely run this card. This is like the key card that you run 9 of for sure. It forces your opponent to discard unless they pay 1. So being able to pump this up and give it Dominate and just really mess up their turns while creating Frostbites is going to be really, really strong. I think Chilling Ice Veins awesome. Coat of Frost is a common equipment. You probably don't want to run this if you have other options, but making a Frostbite token is not bad once per game. So, you know, take that for what you will. Cold Wave is a anti-defense reaction card. You basically get the effect of the ice chest piece, the legendary, on this card when you fuse. So as a tech card, I think it's very useful to put this in if the meta becomes very defensive and defense reactions start coming out in force, because then you can make them pay more for them and really mess up their turns. I would say Cold Wave probably lands in around A tier, just because of that ability to mess up your opponent's defense. And you probably only want to run it with the Lightning Bow, just because of its lack of innate go again, and you want to be able to give it that go again pretty easily. Cracker Jacks. It's just a Goliath Gauntlet. If you have nothing better to run, you can run it, but I wouldn't rely on it. Crown of Seeds. So Crown of Seeds is the new legendary equipment for the Earth class, Earth talent. And as an instant, once per turn, you can pay 1 to put a face down card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck, draw a card, and prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to you this turn. This is mainly useful for Oldhim, because he's going to be a very defensive deck. He's going to want to pay for pitch so that he can use his defense reaction, or so that he can use his shield. So Crown of Seeds costing 1 will let him not only block for 1, but also reduce 1 damage, and possibly swap out his... Well, I guess you have to have a card in Arsenal. But yeah, if you have a card in Arsenal, you can put that card in your hand to give you more blocks, while also kind of replenishing the pitch that you just used. And that can help you cycle through your deck while keeping yourself alive. I think Crown of Seeds is going to be good for Oldhim. I don't think he's going to want to run Helm of Eisen's Peak, or Skullcap even, because this is going to be a good way to stop arcane damage and other such things. I think Crown of Seeds doesn't really work for Briar though, so I wouldn't be surprised to see only Oldhim running Crown of Seeds for the near future. Dazzling Crescendo is a weird card. So it's a Lightning Fusion that gets go again if you fuse, but for Lexi, she already has the ability to give her cards go again with Voltaire, so you have to really think, like, why is the Lightning Fusion getting the go again here? And the only way I can think that makes sense is if you're trying to run this in an ice build, or rather with the Ice Bow Shiver, because with Shiver, you can give it Dominate. So if you're trying to go really tall, giving it go again makes a lot of sense. You know, giving something Dominate and go again with a couple attack buffs is pretty strong, but I really don't think that's going to be worth it. So I'm going to go ahead and put Dazzling Crescendo as like a B tier card. It's an arrow, you know, but it's there are much better options if you want go again. There are much better options if you want Lightning Fusion. So it's probably like a low B tier, high C tier card. Or even lower. I mean, it's the more I think about it, the more awkward it is. So I don't really think I'd be running this card. Deep Blue is actually kind of interesting. It can turn a red card in your hand into a blue pitch effectively once per game. Is that better than Tunic? Probably, like, you know, Tunic, and we can start calling this Blue Nick if we want. But the on-demand 2 resources can really help you out, so it's not a bad card. But you have to run like a ton of reds to make this worth it. Duskblade, so I'd say Deep Blue is like playable. It's probably like a B tier card. Duskblade is interesting. So as a 2-attack weapon that attacks for 1 cost, you can gain 1 extra attack counter onto it if you've played an attack and a non-attack this turn for Rune Blades. So Briar is going to love this because she can get a lot of benefit out of doing a non-attack into an attack with go again into Duskblade for, you know, 3 physical damage, and then at the end of your turn, if you have met that requirement of playing an attack and a non-attack, the card keeps all of its attack counters. If you fail to maintain the requirement, then you lose all your counters. But you can basically stack up a snowballing weapon like Dorinthia can, except it's all on your end. So Chain can run this card as well. Viserai can run this card. Well, it'll be interesting to see how they incorporate into their decks and getting that scaling weapon over time. It'll make ice really important for the hand disruption to prevent them from just freely stacking this by just racing you. So we'll see how it goes with that. We'll go on to Earthlore Surge. Earthlore Surge is probably one of the best Earth cards just because it's a non-attack action, so it synergizes with Briar. It has Go Again and gives an attack buff, which is fine. And it also has, it's a non-attack, so it synergizes with Briar with the embodiment of Earth tokens, as well as having the Go Again to let her make lightning tokens. So Briar's probably going to really like Earthlore Surge, and if you're running Earth Fusion stuff, Old Time's going to like it too, because he'll have enough stuff to pay for it and then swing, so getting like a +5 buff onto the card is pretty strong. I would say it's probably a B+ to A tier card just for the characters that can run it as the best Earth option you probably have. However, now we get to go into Electrify. Now Electrify is nuts. Electrify adds on hit damage to your next attack, is a lightning card that has Go Again, and if you play it from Arsenal, it lets you draw a card. So for Lexi especially, this is crazy because Lexi has the reload mechanic, so you can load this card in your arsenal with such things as a take aim, play it from arsenal, and just replace it right away. Especially if you put the red in there, you're getting 3 on hit damage basically for free because you're replacing the card immediately. If you had something like a tunic resource to play it and pay its 1 cost, then you're doing you're just getting a ton of advantage off of that. Electrify is really strong. Also, don't forget that when you're playing Lexi, you can flip Electrify from your arsenal when it's face down to give Go Again to your next attack, which means that you can play Electrify, draw a card once you played it from arsenal, and now you have an extra card. You have Go Again floating from Lexi's ability, and you can just proceed with your turn. Electrify, crazy card. I would give it A tier, S tier easily. It's very, very strong. Embodiment of Earth and Lightning are interesting tokens. Being able to stack the Embodiment of Earth feels awesome when you're playing Briar, to give all of your defense card or your non-attack actions +1 defense. The only issue is that if you're on the back foot, you're not really going to be able to make these. So it's kind of like a reward for being on the front foot in the matchup. Embodiment of Lightning, I felt like I was wasting a lot of the time. I think it's going to be really tricky to get value out of that card unless you are specifically building around it. So keep that in mind. Embolden is very strong. It is a way to stack up. So it says when it enters the arena, if you control another non-token aura, draw a card. So it helps you kind of build an aura guardian build. At the beginning of your action phase, destroy this, and your next attack begins +3. So it's a way to just kind of cycle through your deck and stack up a bunch of auras. I would say it's probably a upper B tier card because it requires a lot of synergy, but being able to stack up a lot of auras, healing, and attack buffs and make these huge attacks on a turn is going to be pretty scary. So I would definitely say that you can consider running that card if you're playing Guardian. Emerging Avalanche has felt lackluster to me. Making a Frostbite token is great and all, but you're only making 1, and 1 really isn't that big of a deal. It has Go Again, luckily, so you can make 1 and then swing with maybe your hammer or something, but it costs 2, and it gives you +3 on your next turn, which is fine and all, but it requires Ice Fusion, and for Guardian, you're going to want to run like a lot of Guardian cards, not so many Elemental cards, so I would definitely say that Emerging Avalanche is probably on the weaker side of Old Times cards, although it is still very playable. I would say it's probably an upper B tier card or lower A tier, depending on your build. Endless Winter, on the other hand, is crazy. That card's really good. I would put that in A tier overall, or S tier for Oldhim specifically, obviously. You definitely want to run that card as a specialization. And if it's fused as an Ice Fusion, whenever someone adds a card to the chain link, it creates a Frostbite. So it's an anti-defense reaction card. But if it hits, then until the end of their next turn, whenever they activate an ability, it creates a Frostbite under their control. So that would work on their equipments or weapons or things like that. Doesn't stop attack actions, but being able to just jam them with all the Frostbites, it's going to make it really good versus Dash, for instance. Extremely good versus like Katsu. So Endless Winter is going to be pretty good. Also, it works well against Prism. So yeah, if you can play that card, definitely think about it. Entangle is an Earth Fusion that reduces the first attack your opponent plays on their next turn by 2 if it hits. So already it's an Earth Fusion. We're not loving that because Earth cards tend to be pretty weak on their own. You don't really want to play them. Entangle already is a 7 for 3/3. That's a Raging Onslaught stat line, so that's not great. And if it hits, it reduces their next attack by 2. So that's okay, but as a payoff for Earth Fusing with no Go Again or any other effect, I don't really think Entangle is that strong. I think maybe you run it in draft and stuff for the blue pitch and the 3 block, but generally I don't think it's really worth a slot in Constructed. I don't think it's going to be one of the powerhouses or anything like that. Compared to Entwine Earth, which is 1 cost less and 1 attack lower, but it gains +2 attack if it Earth Fuses. So, you know, you're coming in for 8 damage with an Earth Fusion pitching yellow or so, or you can Seismic Surge, pitch a blue, you know, all that. The thing about Entwine Earth is that it's just a stat stick. It just does 8 damage. So while that's pretty good damage, you're effectively attacking with an Enigma Chimera from Illusionist. You only have 2 block, and you're only dealing slightly above average damage. So I would say that if you fuse, it's solid, but otherwise it's just kind of lackluster. So I wouldn't run Earth Fusions just to run this card, basically. If you can run it, it's fine, but I don't think it's that great. Entwine Ice, gaining Dominate is fun. If you have like some attack buff cards, Entwine Ice can be pretty interesting. But there's no really other on-hit effect with it, so unless you're comboing it with other cards like the card that creates Frostbites under your opponent's control, it's not that great. But if you're running a bunch of ice cards, like some of the ones that create Frostbites or that buff, I think Entwine Ice is pretty good. I think you can combo with some stuff pretty easily in Archetype, so I think it's definitely around a upper B tier, lower A tier card. It seems very playable. Entwine Earth, on the other hand, is playable, but not very strong, I wouldn't say, so it's probably like a solid B tier, low B tier card. Entwine Lightning, on the other hand, is very, very strong. It's a 4 attack go again when you have any lightning in your hand, because you can just play it for free, fuse, and then just keep going. So as a 4 damage go again, that's really hard to do anything about. I would say Entwine Lightning is probably an A tier card. The only reason you wouldn't run it is because you need to fit more class cards in your deck for synergy, but as a pure raw value card, it's very high up there. All of these Entwine cards are pretty good for draft, I would say, but in Constructed, I think Ice and Lightning are just a little bit better if you want to run them. Evergreen is interesting as an Earth card. It effectively lets you go infinite, sort of. I wouldn't bend over backwards to fit this into my deck. I would say if you're going to run it, you probably want to run the blue. And I don't know. I don't think it's very good. The 2 block just makes it really unappealing. So for me, I'm going to have to give it like a B tier. It's not bad and unplayable. It's just really not worth the slot on its own compared to Earthlore Surge. Now compare that to Explosive Growth, and Explosive Growth is why you would start running cards like Earth Fusions. If you fuse it for Earth, whenever it deals damage, attacks you control gain +1 for the combat chain. So if you can set up a couple attacks while getting arcane damage through or other on-hit effects through, you can get a crazy amount of attack buffs off of this card. So, you know, it's strong, but it's very card intensive, so unless you have the ability to really have enough cards in your hand to make it work, it's gonna be really fiddly to get it to work. I think the biggest thing that you can do for Explosive Growth is probably to do a heavy Earth focused deck with non-attack actions to get your lightning tokens to give it the go again and attack with 2 tall attacks is what I'm thinking. I think it's gonna be very difficult to get much more than 2 triggers off of this thing, so I would say that's my first impression here. Expose the Elements is a really interesting card. Earth and Ice Fusion. If you do Earth Fusion, it puts a -1 counter on an equipment, and if you do Ice Fusion, it destroys an equipment with 0 defense, unless they pay 2. So this is a great card to have as an instant, because you can really just threaten people with the ability to do either Earth or Ice or both fusions at the same time. And if you can, say, reduce their Fyendal's Spring Tunic down to 0 defense, and they don't have enough resources to pay for it, you just straight up destroy it, which is crazy. Or you can destroy their New Horizon if you get 2 of these tokens onto them, etc. So you can do a lot of damage with this card if you played at the right time. So it's definitely a very good sideboard card. I'd probably say it's an A tier card, just for its ability to absolutely destroy someone's equipment, especially for old him. Lexi can use it decently as well. I don't think Briar would want to run this card, but Lexi can definitely run it and get some good value out of it. Flake Out, love that artwork, by the way. It looks like the ultimate from Hanzo from Overwatch, if you played that game, to me. So as an Ice Fusion card, it's got a normal arrow stat line, and if it's fused, gains Dominate. So this, to me, seems like you're running this in an Ice Fusion deck with the Voltaire bow. I don't think you would want to run this in an Ice Bow deck with Shiver, because Shiver can already give you the Dominate. So you're giving up +1 damage for like 0 other options, versus Voltaire is able to get this go again, and you can actually have a whole turn. So I think Flake Out's probably going to be around a solid B tier card in a Ice Fusion deck that uses the Lightning Bow, just because you can make it really tall and it can do a lot of damage. So with go again into something else. So that seems pretty strong, but otherwise it's not really speaking to me. You can definitely stack some on-hit effects with like your Electrify or your Caught in the Cold. So definitely consider running that card if you're going for those heavy on-hit effects. Dominate's going to be crazy with on-hits. Just make sure they go through. So that'll be one of your better options for doing that. So probably making an A tier card for that archetype. Flash is a lightning version of Lead the Charge, except you get go again instead of gaining an action point. As a general card, I think Flash is very good in Briar. In Lexi, you probably don't need Flash, is what I would say. I would say Flash is probably A tier in Briar and probably like B or C tier in Lexi, just because you don't need the card when you have access to Voltaire. Although it does work with Tome of Fyendal, so the red and yellows can definitely see play in both of them, but it's probably going to work better with Briar just because of access to Vela Flash to turn this into an instant, as well as being able to count towards Briar's lightning tokens. So we can then go into the next card. So Flash Freeze is the Majestic Ice / Lightning Fusion. Whereas we had the Equipment Breaking one, this is the Lightning and Ice one, which says if it's fused with an Ice card, attacks you control this turn gain Dominate unless your opposing hero pays 2, and if you fuse Lightning, it deals 3 on hit. So the fact that you can give Dominate and the on hit on a single card is pretty good, and you can choose the fusion as well, so you're not tied into one. So for Lexi, you definitely want to run this card if you're going for those on hit, heavy, Dominate, tall builds. I don't think you'd want to run this in a Lightning build for the on hit. I think there are better versions of cards to pay for that than this, but the fact that if you're playing for both effects on the same turn with a tall build, I think it's pretty strong. Yeah, I would say it's probably like a upper B tier card, lower A tier, just based off of its flexibility, but also narrowness of archetype. And we can go on to Flicker Wisp. So Flicker Wisp is a action, so not an attack. And Lightning Fusion, and it's fused. Action cards deal 1 more arcane than they would if they would deal arcane, and then this deals arcane. So you can deal 2 arcane with this card, go again. Flicker Wisp is going to be really, really good for Briar. It helps, especially if you fuse it, you can really force your on hits to turn on because of the lack of Arcane Barrier 2. So unless someone's bringing in 2 Arcane Barrier, they're not going to be able to stop this arcane, which means you're going to start forcing your damage through and getting your on hit effects. So Flicker Wisp is going to be easily an S tier card for Briar. She's going to definitely want to run that card. Force of Nature is the Briar spec. Earth Fusion. Whenever an attack card you control hits this turn, if its attack is greater than its base, draw a card. And if it's fused, your next attack this turn gets +1. So this card is basically a plunder run for the entire turn. You are definitely going to want to run this card, combined with some other stuff. Art of War plus this is going to be really gross. And if you can combine this with stuff like Razor Reflex or Lightning Press even, because Briar can run that card and that card is going to be gross, you can really start pumping out some crazy turns and have these really huge pop-off crazy turns. So Force of Nature, S tier card. It's a bit of a build around, but if you can make it work, it's going to really pay off for you. I think Frazzle is going to be an A tier to S tier card for Lexi. The ability to give all of your attacks on extra on hit damage for the whole turn is really strong for Lightning Fusion on a basic arrow stat line. So I would say Frazzle is definitely one of the cards that you want to lean on for Lightning Fusion. It's definitely one of the better ones, and especially if you're using the Voltaire. So I would say it's probably A or S tier. Frostfang. I don't think Frostfang's very good. I think its stat line's a little weak, and it has to hit to get its on hit effect, obviously. So unless you're combining it with attack reactions, it's really not going to be doing too much for you. And I don't think there are any attack reactions in this set that really help you push it over the edge. Even Pummel is kind of like over committing to this idea. So I think Frostfang is probably worth running in an old time deck just to make sure you have ice cards that you can use, but you probably don't want to run the reds and yellows ever, and those are the ones that you on hits. So I don't know. I give Frostfang like a C tier. It seems to be pretty weak. Frost Lock, on the other hand, seems to be pretty good. As an ice fusion, it forces your opponent to not be able to play defense reactions freely because of the tax effect, and then if it hits, or I guess if it's fused, it gains +1, putting up to the break point of 4, which is important. And if it hits until the end of their next turn, they cannot pitch or play cards with have across 0. So this is like a tech card against aggro decks like Chain, and the fact that they can't pitch or play the cards means this is effectively a blanket Chains of Eminence against aggro decks. So Frostlock is pretty strong as a tech card. You definitely want to consider running it if you're running Ice Fusion stuff. I would give it like an A tier, just because it's a little narrow in its applications. Frostbite, your cards cost an additional 1 while you control this. I think you need to have 2 or more Frostbites to really start hurting your opponent. So 1 can normally be played through, and then obviously Frostbite's going to be very strong. It's going to be very pivotal in determining how the meta shakes out. So Fulminate. Fulminate is the Lightning Earth Majestic that lets you... What's the Elemental Lightning Earth Fusion Majestic, sort of like how Flash Freeze was. So if it's fused with an Earth card, attack actions you control gain +3 this turn, and if it was fused with a Lightning card, attack actions have go again. So basically, Fulminate plus Force of Nature is going to be a great combo. You can Force of Nature into Fulminate, and then you can fuse that with a Earth Lightning fusion, such as the Pulse of Candlehold, or you could pay for this with an Energy Potion and fuse with 2 other cards after doing Force of Nature, or having played it from Arsenal or something. And then now you're giving +3 to everything this turn, +4 to your next card. You are drawing every time you hit, and everything is go again. So Fulminate, Force of Nature is going to be like a crazy pop-off combo turn thing, and we'll see how effectively you can pull it off on a consistent basis. Glacial Footsteps seems to be pretty strong. It's a big attack. It costs a lot, but the fact that it gains Dominate if it's fused means that you can easily come in for 10 damage Dominate on a full hand. Just pitch 2 blues, reveal an ice, swing with Glacial Footsteps. That seems really strong, and it blocks 3. So I would definitely say that Glacial Footsteps is going to be one of the cards that Old Time is going to lean towards auto-including, especially the blues. So probably put that into A tier for Old Time. Now, Heart of Ice is the legendary ice equipment. It says once per turn action for 1 cost, cards and activated abilities your opposing hero plays cost 1 additional this turn, go again. So you can only do this on your turn, which means that you're only going to be stopping instants and defense reactions played by your opponent by taxing them by 1. It's got Arcane Barrier 1, which is very relevant for the non-Briar classes if you're in draft. But outside of draft, it's also obviously nice to have that there. I don't think you want to have this in every matchup, though. I think the ability to have the Arcane Barrier is really strong, but the problem is that it's only useful against like hyper controlling decks, and even then it's going to be very situational because there are cards like Cold Wave or you know, all these other ice fusion cards that already have this effect built into it. So it's definitely not auto include by any means. It's definitely going to be strong in situational instances, so I wouldn't say it's a bad card, but I'd probably put it onto B tier just because it doesn't seem to be necessary. By the way, I love the fact that this legendary, like the Crown of Flowers, is not mandatory, or the Crown of Leaves, or whatever it was called. The fact that they are not mandatory just means so much for the game, where legendaries are no longer going to be auto-include, best in slot. You actually have choices whether or not you want to run them at all. So that feels very good as a player who wants more people to get into the game and not feel like they have to just buy like a billion legendaries. Heaven's Claws, I think, is one of the best lightning cards that's been released, besides Ball Lightning. I mean, there are a lot of good lightning cards, and the reason I think it's so good is because it blocks 3 and is lightning card. So for Lexi specifically, she can flip over this card in Arsenal to get go again to her next attack, which can directly apply to this card. So it turns into a 5 go again for 1, which is very strong. And it blocks 3, so you can always hold it in your hand to fuse if you need to. And then it, again, like blocking 3 is huge for lightning or elemental cards. It's very above curve for that. So as a attack action that is fusion material as well as good blocking, I don't think you can go wrong with the Heaven's Claws. Although so far I've only been liking the reds. I don't think I would want to really run the blues or the yellows. But you know, the blues are definitely fine, so I would definitely consider running that. Honing Hood is a common equipment. It lets you fix your arsenal, but if you have New Horizon, this shouldn't be an issue, so we're gonna ignore Honing Hood. But yeah, I would say Heaven's Claws are probably like a upper B tier card. They don't really do too much, but they are very useful. I think Icequake Red is awesome. I think it's an S tier card. Giving +3 and an on hit to give Frostbite tokens to any attack you make, so including your weapon. It's very, very strong. I think you can even justify running the blue and the yellow, depending on your build. I think it's one of the best ice cards to play, and I would definitely say Icequake is probably an A tier card at minimum. Ice Storm is kind of awkward to use. It's a Lightning Lice fusion, so you have to do both at the same time to get the effect. It's a 0 cost, buff 3 to your next arrow, and then you also, if you fuse, every time you deal damage to a hero this turn, it creates as many Frostbites under their control, and it deals 1 on hit damage when your attack hits. So you can combo this. Like if you do 2 Ice Storms fusing with Pulse of Eisenloft, or Volthaven rather, and get the double fusion, and you're stacking 2 instances of on hits, and you're plussing by 6. I mean, you can really just blow someone out. But unless you dominate it, it's really not going to be that much different than them just simply blocking everything. So it's interesting. It's never going to be a bad card to play. You're never going to be sad to get +3 onto an arrow, but the fusion's going to be a little awkward to get off, and then the payoff's not really that great, I wouldn't say. So I would say Ice Storm's probably like a low A tier card, maybe upper B tier, just based on how finicky it is to use and how low the payoff seems to be, unless you just get a really nutty turn. Icy Encounter is a decent card for Oldhim. 6 attack for 2, creates a Frostbite, fuses ice. It's decent. And the blue also has the breakpoint of 4, so I think that's definitely one of the ones that you can justify running alongside the other ice cards. So Icy Encounter, I'd probably say, is like upper B tier. You're not going to want to run this like by cutting other stuff, but it's definitely a solid inclusion. Inspire Lightning seems to be very strong for Briar, especially the reds. I don't think you would really want to run the yellows or blues. it doesn't block enough, and although you can buff it with your Earth tokens, the type of deck that's going to want to run this is going to be a Lightning Fusion deck, where you are probably using the double fusion lets you banish stuff from your graveyard to just chain off a bunch of these lightnings in a turn. So, you know, it does arcane. It's pretty strong. It's kind of like a weaker zap in a class that doesn't normally get to get zap. So, I would say it's probably going to be like an upper B tier card, lower A tier. Definitely seems playable, but we'll see how many decks rely on it compared to just attacking really wide. Invigorate seems to be okay. I feel like Red Invigorate's the one you want to run if you're focusing on a fusion deck. It's a better draft card than it is in Constructed, because there's just other cards you would want to run if you had the access to your own class. And but +4 for 0 is really good. So, you know, you might want to run this in a deck that's focusing on fusion. You're just going really tall. So keep that in mind. Also, it works really well with Briar's Earth tokens to give it the plus defense. So not bad at all. Just keep in mind that it's a very synergy reliant card, so you have to make sure that you are not that you're accounting for that when you're deck building. The Fabled Korshem Crossroad of Elements. We're not really going to talk about this for a while. Until we get Unlimited, this is going to be a cold foil that no one's going to really be able to get. And all it really does is it says whenever you reveal a card on your turn, you get to get a resource, a health, an attack, or if you're defending while you're revealing, you get a defense, and then destroy this if a player has not gained one of those resources from this effect. So for fusing, that's pretty interesting. Like, it gives you a really big payoff for fusing, but you have to fuse like every single turn to get the value out of it over time. So, and your opponent can fuse stuff too and get values. So I would say Korshem is interesting. I wouldn't really worry about running this card though, even if you had access to it. Maybe if you had, because it's a one of, it's a legendary, so you're not gonna be able to rely on playing this card every game while fusing everything. So it's probably like a B tier card. It's very playable, but very build around heavy. Lexi has 2 abilities. So she's an Ice and Lightning hero. She can flip an Ice card face up in her arsenal to give a Frostbite token to an opponent, and she can flip a Lightning card in her arsenal from face down to face up to give go again to her next attack. And it doesn't. So she can flip any card in her arsenal, but she gets the bonus effect based on what it is. That's a really strong ability. It allows her to enable her New Horizon to be able to add more cards to her arsenal, and you're definitely going to want to be making ample use of this effect to sequence your stuff well on your turn. I would say Lexi's ability so far, combined with all her cards, is going to be very strong. I think she's very, very high potential. Lighted Up is an interesting card. It's her specialization. It's a yellow arrow for 1. So it's a normal arrow stat line, attacks for 4, which is a good breakpoint. And depending on how many equipments your opponent controls, if you fused it for lightning, you deal 1 on hit to them for every equipment they control. So early game, this can potentially hit someone for a maximum of 9 damage for 1 cost, because if they have a shield and they have equipment in each slot, you're threatening 5 on hit damage. 5 instances of on hit damage, by the way. So that can stack with, say, bolt lightning or ball lightning or other such effects for some crazy combos. As well as you can combine it with lightning storm to do just a ton of pings to blow someone out, but you have to hit. And 4 is not too hard to block, so unless you're giving this dominate with the shiver, it's going to be pretty easy for people to block this. And if Light Up deals damage to an opponent equal to or greater than the number of equipments they control lose and cannot activate their abilities on their next turn. So already it's a decent effect just to turn off your opponent's equipment for a turn, but if you combine this with something like Lightning Storm, that's going to be really, really, really strong. So definitely keep that in mind. Also, don't forget that Lightning Storm costs 0, so it's pretty easy to get the fusion if you have both Lightning and Ice in your hand. So, you know, keep that in mind, that it's a bit easier to play that card than it might look, but Light It Up fuses only Lightning, so it's a bit more generic. I would say Light It Up is probably like a solid A tier card. It's definitely going to be better in some matchups than others, but the fact that you can just deal like a ton of damage if they don't block it, or if you get over their blocks with an attack action or something, or Dominate means that it's going to be a really efficient card most of the time. Lightning Press. You all know how much I love Lunging Press, and when I saw Lightning Press, I swear I thought it was just a blue card, and I would still run this card. It's a blue, that's a lightning card, which means you can reveal it to fuse, and then once your attack is on this attack chain, you can play this card to give it attack. That's crazy. It costs 0 for an attack buff as an instant, which means you can play it on your opponent's turn, so you can actually block with things as against Prism and pop her Phantasms easier. Fun fact. But when I saw that they had reds and yellows, I'm like, oh my god, that's insane. The red is so gross. It's a 3 attack for 0 buff as an instant. That's insane. You can flip it with Lexi's ability to give your next attack go again. And when you combine this with the card Endless Arrow, Lightning Press is disgusting. Briar can make use of this card, but I think this is much more of a Lexi card. And it does so amazingly. This card is S tier. I think the red is especially good. I think you can justify running the blue in certain decks, but I think the red is like choice. It is so good. Red Lightning Press, S tier. The rest are like, you know, whatever. I wouldn't really run the yellows. I wouldn't really run the blues unless you have a very specific math you're trying to achieve with your arrows or your cost curve. But yeah, no, this card's insane. Overperforming for sure. Lightning Surge. I don't think this card's very good. It seems to be a very finicky way to get go again. If you've gotten in draft, it's okay. I wouldn't really run it in Lexi because it's got kind of like negative synergy with itself. So yeah, I don't think Lightning Surge is that great for Lexi. For Briar, it's okay in draft. Probably like a C tier card overall. Not that impressive. Mark of Lightning. This card's actually really good. I would say it's probably up there at around A tier. Like you could definitely consider running this in Lexi or Briar when you're trying to stack all these on hit effects instead of any other card, because the ability to force damage through even if they block and get your on hit triggers is really scary for free. I would say Mark of Lightning is definitely very playable, and if you have a very on hit heavy build, this can be the way that you just close out some games as just a kind of like a Dreamweavers type of deal where you save it for the end game and you use it to close out a game. Compared to Mulch, Mulch is an Earth card, but like an Earth fusion, but like it just doesn't do anything. You just kind of have a weaker disable effect. Like, okay, that's not great. I wouldn't really run Mulch. And I wouldn't run Earth cards to play Mulch. I'll put it that way. You can run Earth cards, you can play Mulch, but they're not making me want to play Earth Oldtime. Compared to New Horizon, I'd say Mulch is like probably like a C tier card in my opinion. New Horizon though, New Horizon's S tier. This is mandatory to run with Lexi if you're running the Lightning Bow. The Ice Bow you don't need it exactly, but the Lightning Bow you 100% need New Horizon. It is awesome. You get another arsenal slot. You can flip your cards face up to open your other arsenal slot and keep playing out your turn. It's amazing. It blocks too if you have to. If they break it, you lose all your arsenal cards, which sucks, but this card's insane. New Horizon S tier. Oaken Old. Earth and Ice Fusion. It's a little hard to get this to go off because it costs 3. And if it's fused, it gets +2 Dominate, and if it hits, they put 2 random cards from their hand on the bottom of their deck. So it's kind of like a Crippling Crush, like a 9 attack Crippling Crush with Dominate for 3. But it's really hard to pull off that fusion in Oldtime from what I've seen. So I would say it's probably like an A tier card for Oldtime because he really likes the card. But I think just in the general power level, it's definitely on the lower end of the power curve, just because it's so hard to get that to pull off. Oldtime is pretty interesting as a hero as well. So Earth and Ice Fusion, like element. And his defense reaction, if you pitch an Earth card, he gets to prevent the next 2 damage. He would take that turn. And as a defense reaction, if he pitches Ice, the attacking hero puts a card from their hand on top of their deck. So that's pretty interesting. Like he can slow you down either with the reach damage, or he can slow you down with the rest of your turn by just messing you up. So Oldtime's ability is going to be pretty interesting to see how it evolves. I haven't really seen it used to great effect yet, but it definitely gives you a better incentive to use Earth blues, again, to pitch to stop the damage. So, yeah, we'll see. Although you can also pitch like a yellow earth and like a yellow ice to block with your shield, stop 2 damage, and send a card from their hand back to their deck. So you're effectively playing with a 2-card hand to their 3-card hand, and you're still blocking 3. So that's pretty interesting. And then you can like pitch, or you can block something and then swing through hammer next turn. So it seems to really reward like a full-on ice and earth elemental build, running very few guardian actions, which makes sense. You know, maybe Oldheim runs very few elemental guardian attacks like Oakenold and only the best ones, and then just everything else is like blue pitch, ice, and earth cards to help turn on his abilities. That could definitely be how that ends up happening. Oldheim's ability is going to be interesting to see. I have no idea how strong it is. I think it's safe to say that he'll be very playable, and the effect is decently strong, so we can say the effect is like a B tier effect. We'll see how strong it is over time, though. Overflex. Overflex is a take aim that costs 1 and gives you 1 more attack. I don't think Overflex is very good. The fact you have to pay 1 is going to matter a lot in a lot of these cases, and the reload's great and all, but I would rather just play take aim in every case. In draft, though, it's very good, but in constructed, I think you just would prefer take aim in every case just because of the flexibility of the 0 cost. Plume of Evergrowth, it's a common head equipment. It's kind of interesting. You can pitch a blue and put an earth card back in your hand from your graveyard. It's an action or an instant, but like there aren't that many good earth cards, so you should probably just run a different helmet than this. I would give this like as a card design, it's very strong, like in theory, but in practice, like you're swapping a blue in your hand with the card from your graveyard, and the earth cards just aren't really worth running. So I would say that the payoff's not really there right now. Probably like potentially an A tier card. For right now, it's dependent on how good earth cards are, and earth cards aren't great, so I would say this is probably like a B, C tier card. Probably C tier. Polar Blast is interesting. It gives Dominate to your next attack if your opponent doesn't pay like a bunch of resource. It's beautiful in foil, by the way. I was lucky enough to pull one. And if it's played from Arsenal, you draw a card, which means Lexi kind of likes running this card, but the problem is that Electrify is just so much better for her that you're really wasting your efficiency by doing the Dominate, especially because they can choose to pay to remove the Dominate. So I would say that Polar Blast is definitely more of like an Oldheim card, like a slower Oldheim card. So it's probably like a B tier, low B tier card from what I've felt in my testing. Although the blue one is definitely the one you want because just these pay effects, you want them to waste those resources. So the fact that you can make them pay 1 makes them just kind of have to waste a card or give you the Dominate while you have the flexibility of the blue pitch. Pulse of Candlehold, Earth Lightning card. So it counts as both for the purposes of fusion. And it's legendary, you can only have 1. But you can put up to 2 Earth, Lightning, or Elemental actions from your graveyard on top of your deck. So keep in mind, Plume of Evergrowth can give you back Pulse of Candlehold and Pulse of Eisenloft. That makes it a lot better because you can play this card and get it back to like do fusion stuff later. But just keep in mind that I guess it can't give you this one because it's a defense react, but it can give you Pulse of Candlehold back, which is pretty good for Briar. Briar's the only one that can run Pulse of Candlehold because it's both Earth and Lightning, and you know, even though it's Earth / Lightning, like it's actually Earth plus Lightning, so you can't like so like a Prism, even though she's Light Illusionist, can't run Light Warrior cards. It's the same thing as Pulse of Candlehold, where you can't run this in Lexi or Oldhim. So this is a Briar card, and it makes sense because you can put actions from your graveyard on top of your deck. So it kind of lets her reuse some cards. So it's pretty strong. I mean, I would say Pulse of Candlehold as an action that lets you help turn on your Lightning tokens for Briar, as well as turn on your Rosetta Thorn or other cards. It's definitely an auto-include. You definitely want to run Pulse of Candlehold. Pulse of Eisenloft is a 2-cost 6 block. That's the same stat profile as Soul Shield, although it also is a blue, so it's even better. And it's a legendary, so your it lets you buff the rest of your cards for the rest of the turn. So as a defense reaction, that's a blue. Like, it's not bad, and it's a fusion card. So definitely feels like an auto include as a blue for sure. Then we can go to Pulse of Volthaven. It's a red. Buffs your next lightning, ice, or elemental by 4. It's a legendary. It fuses both lightning and ice at the same time. This card is definitely something you want to consider running. I'm not running it in my current lightning focus build because I don't need the ice fusion, and I'm not really relying on elemental cards to attack with. But if you're running, you're relying on a lot of fusions, you definitely run this card. You're running Lightning Storm, you're definitely running this card, or Ice Storm, whatever it's called. So all the pulses I'd say are definitely A tier or S tier, depending on what your build is. Ragamuffin's hat. I don't know why this card exists. It's kind of cute, I guess. Artwork's kind of fun, but nah. C D tier card. D tier card, honestly. It's almost useless. Rampart of the Ram's Head. S tier card. Old times. Gonna run this in every case. It's really good versus dash. It's really good against chain. You can combo it with your hero power to make sure that you are blocking lots of damage, and you don't have to use it either. Like, it doesn't break, so you're kind of chilling. It's good card. Rejuvenate. It's like a bad Sigil of Solace. Just run Sigil of Solace. Yeah, this card's like really bad. D tier. Yeah, no. Rejuvenate, not good. Rites of Lightning. It gains Go Again if you fuse Lightning. That's a great card for Briar. Briar loves this card. Go Again's good. Deals Arcane if you fuse. You have to deal the Arcane to get the Go Again, so that can be kind of tricky to pull off if they've got Null Runes. So, you'd probably want to make sure that you can make sure you're doing that. But even so, it's got some good stuff going for it. I'd say probably like upper B tier. It's got counterplay. It's not amazing, but it's solid. Rites of Replenishment is going to be in the same camp as Rites of Lightning, where it's solid. It's got some cool late game potential with putting stuff back in your deck, but like Earth Fusion with this card is kind of okay. Like, it's an efficient card. It's a 2/6/3, so already as vanilla, it's strong. If you're going like a tall Briar, you definitely would run Rites of Replenishment. Otherwise, I wouldn't really bother. It's not something you just fit into every Briar deck, that's for sure. It's probably like a overall B tier card. Rosetta Thorn is definitely one of the more interesting options for Briar. The 2 Arcane is really good for chip damage over time, and it costs 1, so it's really flexible to deal 4 damage for 1, assuming you've met its requirement of playing an attack and a non-attack that turn. So yeah, no, I think Rosetta Thorn's really good. It's probably like an A tier card. It's definitely worth considering running Rosetta Thorn instead of Duskblade or something. Rotten Old Buckler, common, whatever. Just don't run that card. If you want to run an equipment, run the Ram's Head. Obviously, wait until the price comes down because it's a legendary. Runaways. This card is really awkward. Like, sometimes it just doesn't do anything. It only blocks 1 damage. Like, you could just run Iron Rots and be happy, or Null Rune and be happy. In draft, it's kind of okay, but in constructed, I think it's like a D tier card. Cool art though. Seek and Destroy, A tier card. It's not as crazy as you'd think, because it's like, oh, it looks like a Command and Conquer, but it's not. The defense reaction part of the Command and Conquer is like a really key part to stop the on hits, right? And Seek and Destroy is good. It's a +3 buff and can reset the game state on your opponent's side by discarding all their cards and destroying their arsenal at the end of their turn. But so I mean, I'm running 3 copies. I think it's great, but it's not actually come up that often in practice. It's definitely like a slower game type of card, since your opponent can still play out their whole hand and arsenal on their next turn. This is just kind of for breaking up combo stuff. So against like Lumina Bolton, this card is nuts. This card is great. Against Bolton, that's like a S tier card. Against other people, it's like A tier. It's good. Shiver. Shiver is one of Lexi's bows. Pay 1 as an instant. You can load an arrow and into your arsenal and give it +1 or dominate. So this is gonna be like the tall Lexi build. Just a lot of attack buffs, throwing one big arrow at someone. You might run this with lightning cards, but I think Shiver's just probably going to be an attack buff, heavy, dominate type of strategy. I don't think you're going to want to run lightning fusions with this. You're probably going to want to run ice fusions with the frostbite token makers and just really like hold someone down with Shiver. Although you can do like a heavy on hit version with like electrifies and stuff like that with Shiver. You could do that with the dominate, but once per turn loading arrow is a big deal. It really limits the type of things you can do, so it's definitely going to be a, like I said, low on arrow, high on buff deck. Shock Charmers. Shock Charmers are interesting. They are lightning legendary equipment that lets you pay 2 resource to add 1 on hit damage to your attack. Your next attack. The fact that this card is a non-once per turn instant means that if you can set up a lot of resources with things like energy potion or other blues and things in hand, in the end game when you're throwing a breakpoint arrow at someone or a breakpoint attack, that you are threatening just lethal out of nowhere. It's very strong. It costs a lot of setup though, so it's not going to work in every build. It's definitely not auto include, but in certain matchups, it's going to be very useful for you. So I would say Shock Charmers is like an A tier card. It definitely has a lot of competition, at least for Lexi, with the Bullseye Bracers and the Mark of Lightning. But as a flexible card, it does that job. It's definitely a playable and good card, although not auto-include by any means. Shock Striker is a lightning attack that lets you once per turn give the extra 1 on hit damage. Like, that's kind of funny, but like it's not great. Shock Striker doesn't have a lot going for it on its own, so like unless you're ball lightning, pitch a card, Shock Striker, I don't think you're really getting a ton of value out of it. So probably like a upper C tier card. Sigil of Suffering, S tier card. Runeblade loves this card. It's a defense react that does 1 damage to your opponent. And if you have multiple of these on the same turn, they buff each other. So no, it's only +1. So no, they're still good though. You don't get the multiple buffs. It's not gain 1/+1 whenever you deal Arcane this turn. It's just if you've dealt it. So never mind. Sigil of Suffering still really good. Still S tier. Still defense react that does damage to your opponent. And they can null rune the Arcane to reduce the defense by 1, which is fun. You know, we'll see how it plays out over time, but I can definitely see a lot of Rune Blades running this card. Singeing Steel Blade. It's like a Arcanic Crackle that has 1 more attack. I think if you wanted this effect, you would just run Arcanic Crackle. Yep. I'd probably say this is like a C tier card. Snapshot. Snapshot is great. I love Snapshot. Snapshot's awesome. With the Lightning Bow, this lets you run a heavy lightning deck where you have Voltaire and you can attack for 0 with Lightning Fusion with Go Again, and then it doesn't even have to hit. You just, as a fusion, you get to activate your bow again. So you can play in a certain hand, right? Like let's say you had a lightning in hand and a blue in hand and a snapshot in arsenal. You could have 3 snapshots, and you could do snapshot from arsenal, or you would first flip snapshot and then play snapshot from hand with Voltaire, and then have go again, and then you get to fuse it, and then you get to go again, and then do it again, and then do it again. And so you just keep loading your bow with snapshot. I think snapshot's really good. I think you can definitely consider running blues and reds. and maybe even yellows. It seems to be very, very strong, considering it has an unconditional upside to fusing lightning, although it is card intensive. So, although with 3 of a kind, that makes Snapshot like incredibly good. So, Snapshot, very, very, very strong. And either build, by the way, you can do a lightning build with Snapshot and Shiver, or you can do Snapshot with Voltaire and really get a ton of value. Snow Under, and so Snapshot I put like S tier, seems to be really, really strong. Snow Under is like an ice fusion that makes Frostbite if it hits. It's not very exciting. You can buff it and make more Frostbites, and then it's kind of scary. It's probably like a tier card for Oldhim, but because it makes Frostbites if it hits, and you can combo with other stuff. But I don't know. It doesn't seem too crazy, so maybe there can be better options. So Tomorrow is like the Earth version of the Electrify and Polar Blast. It lets you put an Earth or Elemental card from your graveyard on the bottom of your deck. If it's played from your arsenal, you draw a card. So the Earth cards are kind of bad because they don't really do anything. Like, this effect is cool and all, like, oh, recycling cards is great and all, but unless you're in the end game fatigue scenario, So Tomorrow doesn't really do anything. So I guess the Oldhim would like using the blues. I don't think Briar wants reds or yellows. I think, Oldhim could maybe run the reds and blues and yellows, but like, I don't know. I feel like if they're running any of them, they're running the blues for the pitch and the fusion, and then late game maybe play the So Tomorrow to kind of put stuff back in your deck and keep going. That seems to be what it is. I would say the blue one is probably like playable at like B tier. The rest of them, I don't really think so. I don't really see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Spellbound Creepers is the legendary Runeblade leg equipment. As an instant, you can make your next non-attack action an instant on your turn, and that puts a counter on Spellbound Creepers. So you put a bind counter. At the beginning of your end phase, you destroy these boots unless you have dealt arcane damage to your opponent equal to or greater than the number of bind counters on this card. Blade Break 1. So this card's really interesting if you're playing like a lightning focused build with Briar. The fact that you can do the card that's like 1 cost, deal 3 arcane means it's gonna be really hard for people to stop that, and so you're gonna be able to play those as instants, and you can do this in your opponent's turn, but then you're having to do more you're gonna have to be doing more damage to be able to maintain the bind counters, because you're stacking your bind counters even faster. It'll be a really interesting card. It's high complexity. It seems to be powerful. I don't think you just run this in any build of her. I think Snapdragons are going to give you a lot more value in most cases, or even Sutcliffe Suede Hides. But Spellbound Creepers are going to be very interesting as a high complexity lightning kind of combo deck for sure. Especially like Flicker Wisp and stuff like that. Sting of Sorcery is a cool card. It's a majestic Runeblade card, blue, 0 cost. Go again. Attack actions you control gain when you attack with this, deal 1 arcane to target hero. And it's an aura, so it lasts the whole turn. So that's pretty cool. It's a non-attack action that lets you kind of stack up stuff for Briar. And also, Viserai can use it and Chain can use it. It seems to be pretty strong. It's kind of like it's going to be really strong on Chain, because he just has more attacks than anybody else. Otherwise, it's kind of just like a, deal 2 arcane kind of deal. It's just another reason to run Null Rune in your main board or sideboard. And yeah, I'd say it's probably like a A tier card. It's definitely going to make you run Null Rune. If you don't run Null Rune, this will run you over. I'm sure of it. Stir the Wildwood is a very interesting Earth Fusion Runeblade card. This is why you run the Earth Bend. Like you run Briar Thorn plus, or no, Briar, what's it called? What was it called again? Yeah, Bramble Spark. Yeah, you run Bramble Spark with the Stir the Wildwood. That's why you do Bramble Spark, Stir the Wildwood as a combo by just revealing a Earth card, pitching a yellow or something, and then playing Stir the Wildwood is like straight up a, if you do both reds, is like straight up a 13 damage play, which is really good. And you still have the Earth card in your hand. So with 3 cards, you can do, with a 4-card hand and playing 3 cards, you can deal 13 damage. That's really strong. That's obviously if the arcane hits and everything, but you're kind of expecting it to. And if not, you're still threatening a really huge tall attack. So Tall Briar definitely wants to use Stir the Wildwood, and the blues and yellows and reds are all equally good as each other because the buffs are really good. That's what you're kind of playing it for. So I definitely think Stir the Wildwood is going to be like an A-tier card for Tall Briar. However strong that deck ends up being. Strength of Sequoia, I don't like this card. It's an Earth Fusion for Guardian already. Earth Fusions have to be really worth it. As a red, it gives you +3 attack and makes you 1 Seismic Surge token. That's not only boring, but also not very threatening. So I am not big on Strength of Sequoia. I think it's like C tier. Because I think Earth Oldhim is going to be C tier. Summerwood Shelter is an Earth instant, which lets you basically do the same thing as Reinforce the Line. But it also works on all actions, not just attack actions. That's kind of cool, I guess. I don't love it. It's a good card to fuse with because you can arsenal it and get some value out of it on your turn. But it's okay. It's probably one of the better Earth cards to fuse with, so it's probably one of the first ones you want to think about. It's basically like a pseudo defense reaction. It works on any action card you defend with, and again, like you can fuse with it and arsenal it at the end of your turn, and then just get it out of there when they attack you. So, not bad. And if it's clogging your arsenal, you can shuffle it away with your Earth cards that do that, like Tome of Harvest or something. So, I would say Summerwood Shelter is probably one of the better Earth cards. One of the ones you would want to run. Sutcliffe Suede Hides is basically Snapdragons that cost 1, except you can only activate it if you played a non-attack action this turn, and it gives your attack go again no matter what its cost is. So it's a bit more high ceiling than Snapdragons, but has a bit more setup required. So it's decent. It can definitely let you go and help more in the tall builds than the wide builds. Wide builds probably just want snaps, and tall builds probably want Suede Hides. Tear Asunder. This card is nuts. It gives Dominate and double discard onto your next Guardian attack, and +1 as well to boot. So that's 3 of. That's really strong. It blocks 3, pitches blue. I mean, what more could you want? I would say Tear Asunder is easily an S tier card. That is one of the definite auto includes in any Guardian deck that doesn't have Crippling Crush. And even in those decks, you probably want to run this card. Thump, on the other hand, is I guess you can combo it with Tear Asunder, but you're gonna have like a Seismic to do that. I don't know. It doesn't seem great to me. Dominate, and you can just like if you combine Thump with Tear Asunder and one Seismic Surge from like a Tectonic Plating, yeah, you can do like a 7 damage turn. Dominate, discard your opponent's entire hand. That's pretty good. -1 card, but that's kind of pie in the sky, and in draft it's going to be fine because it blocks 3 and it's just a solid card, but I don't know. Tear Asunder is definitely like S tier. Thump's probably like B tier. It's got a lot of synergy with all these attack buffs and stuff, but unless you're running Thump and going heavy on like the Aura build, I don't really see it being that worth it for you. Titan's Fist is the common weapon for Oldhim. It seems okay. It's like an Anothos for one hand. Bravo can think about using this with the shield and be happy about it because he'll just get the 4 attack with the Anothos and be able to block against like dash and stuff. So he'll probably want to run that card. And then, so I think Titan's Fist is very playable. It's definitely worth running. I like Anothos tier. Tome of Harvests. This is a blue 3-cost Earth card that lets you block 2, and as an additional cost to play it, you put a card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck, and then you draw 3 cards. So the interesting thing about this card is you pitch a blue, you play this card. You put a card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck, you draw 3. So it costs you 2 cards from hand and a card from arsenal to play. And so if you had 4 cards in hand, you went up to 5 cards in hand and nothing in arsenal. So a 5-card hand is pretty good. technically you already had a 5-card hand by having a card in Arsenal, but that is what it is, right? It's not as good as like a now it has Go Again, so it's not strictly like worse than any other Tome card, but the most important thing about Tome of Harvest is that you're basically playing this in a slow matchup where you're trying to filter your hand and get a card from Arsenal out of there that you don't want to get more pitch access. And it's a blue. So, I mean, Tome of Harvest is definitely going to be one of those long game type of cards that you can really get some good value out of by, again, turning cards in your arsenal into pitch value. Oldham's probably going to like this better than Briar is. I think Briar is probably going to want to go for more lightning focused builds with Go Wide. But if you're going for a Go Tall Briar build, this is one of the Earth cards that you'll definitely think about running, and you'll probably try and pull it off to help you turn on your other effects that require non-attack actions to be played. Also Gorganian Tome. So it's kind of like a Gorganian Tome that's a bit fatter, right? So you can get rid of 3 cards to draw 3 cards, whereas Gorganian's like you get rid of 1 to draw 1, right? So it's like a big Gorganian Tome. Turn Timber is a defense reaction that requires being fused to be really worth playing. It's like a slightly better unmovable sort of. I don't know. I don't like it. I think it's not really worth running. Earth in Oldham is just, no matter what I can see, it doesn't seem to be working out. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems really lackluster. Vela Flash, on the other hand, that's a really good card. Lightning Fusion turns your next non-attack into an instant this turn. That's a strong effect. You can make Tome of Fyendal an instant. You can make any lightning damage dealing a non-attack action an instant. You can make a potion an instant. I mean, there's so many things you can do with that. Like, that's crazy strong. It doesn't even have to have Go Again to be valid or like valuable. So definitely keep that card on your radar for lightning versions of Briar. And now we're getting to the end of this list here. Thanks for sticking by so far. Let's finish this out strong. So Voltaire, Strike Twice. This card is insane. This card is easily S tier. Lexi loves this card. It's the best bow that she has access to, in my opinion, generally, because of the combo potential it has with stuff like Endless Arrow. The fact that you can load this twice per turn, give your attacks Go Again on demand, or attack if you need to, has been insane in my testing so far. This card's great. I can't wait to show you guys a deck list about it and to show you some gameplay once the cards finally come out. Weave Earth is an Earth card that gives you +3 for 0. That's a decent card for Earth. I think if you're running Earth, this is one of the cards you run for fusing, and you probably run, whichever copies you need for pitch. Although the blues, I'm not big on for Oldtime, but Weave Earth seems to be very decent. I love the artwork. The artwork is really cool. Weave Ice, on the other hand, it gives something Dominate if it's fused. Otherwise, it just gives it a normal buff. I'm going to say Weave Ice is kind of on the weaker end of these. It's probably like a C tier card. Weave Earth's probably like a B tier card, upper B tier. Weave Lightning is probably a tier card just because Go Again and Attack are really good different things to get. I'd say Weave Lightning is definitely on the stronger end as a 0 cost. That can just give something Go Again. That's a ton of value. Winter's Bite, S tier card. Forcing your opponent to lose a card either by discarding or pitching is insane. If you can force them to discard multiple cards with Winter's Bite, that's also insane with the red. S tier. Winter's Grasp is a vanilla. I think it's, whatever. You can run it if you want. I don't care. Blocks 3. Blue is probably good for that. And then lastly, Winter's Wail. 4 attack, 3 cost. If you pitch an ice, makes a frostbite if it hits. Very good. Oldtime's going to want to run this like in every case. And yeah, that's the set. Thanks for sticking around until the end. I'm really looking forward to making some decks with all these cards. And be on the lookout for some more videos about the various decks I'm coming up with and more theory crafting. And I will see you in the next video.